I want to introduce myself. First of all, I'm Nomi Joyrich, and I'm the Michigan Director for Jews for a Secular Democracy. And I want to start by thanking our generous sponsor, Interfaith America, and our co-sponsors, and there's a long list of them, so I'm going to just read them out. So the Society for Humanistic Judaism, Jewish Community Relations Council of Broward County, the National Council of Jewish Women in Greater Miami, Secular Humanist Jewish Circle in Tucson, Congregation Beth Adam, Temple Israel of Orlando. Other co-sponsors include Or Adam Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, Voting Access for All Coalition, S&D PJ Housing, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism of Metro Detroit, the Jewish Community Relations Council for Tucson and Southern Arizona, Fair Voting Alliance, When You Vote, I Win, Femmes for Democracy, Florida Now, and RAC Florida. So I want to thank all of those wonderful co-sponsors. And Paul, if you could put this other slide on from Interfaith America. I know there are a lot of people who are here from organizations that are voting rights organizations. So I just want to take a moment to talk about these mini grants that are available from Interfaith America. And they're giving out $1,000 micro grants to local civic and religious organizations. So if you're a synagogue or a civic organization and you're working on voting, then take a moment, take a screenshot, or use the QR code, and please, apply for the Interfaith America microgrants, $1,000 to help your organization. So I hope some of you can take advantage of that. And you can take that off the screen now. And I want to thank our wonderful panelists, which is Lisa Brown, my personal county clerk from Oakland County, Michigan, and my friend who I've known for a long, long time, Gabriella Cázares-Kelly from Pima County, and Joe Scott from Broward County. And I'm going to read their bios before they talk. I'm not going to read all the bios all at once, just to make it a little easier. I'm going to ask each of the panelists 3 questions, and I'll tell you what they all are now. And I'm going to give each panelist about 10 minutes to answer the questions. And after that, we're going to be opening it up to questions from the participants. I do want to see, I see one person wrote in the chat that I'm breaking up. Am I breaking up for anyone else? Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right, Margaret, I hope your connection is okay. So the 3 questions that I'm going to ask all of the panelists are, first, can you each describe your role and responsibility in your respective county regarding election management and integrity? So what your role is. And then my next question is going to be, in the last presidential election, some people question the validity of the election results, and that was due in part to concerns over the security of ballots after they were cast. So what I want to know is, are the elections in your county and in your state secure? And what are the most critical measures that your county has implemented to ensure the security of ballots from the moment they're cast until the very final count? And my last question is, overall, how do you address and manage public concerns, skepticism, and misinformation about the election process in your communities? And I'm going to start with County Clerk from Oakland County, Michigan, Lisa Brown. Let me read you Lisa's resume. Lisa Brown is the Oakland County Clerk, Register of Deeds in Oakland County, Michigan, is home to over 1.2 million people. She was first elected to this position in 2012. She serves as the official keeper of the record, as well as the Chief of Elections Administrator. Clerk Brown is a certified elections registration administrator, which is the highest designation for those in the elections profession. Under Brown's leadership, the Oakland County Elections Division has taken on an expanded role and has become a model for others in making voting more accessible. Lisa believes that democracy is a team sport. I've seen that in action, Lisa. Her office's collaboration with local municipalities to develop the state's largest consolidated absent voter counting board received national recognition for excellence and innovation from the National Association of Counties. More recently, the Oakland County partnered with local communities to pilot the state's largest early voting program in November of 2023. Clerk Brown serves on numerous statewide boards, including a gubernatorial appointment to the Michigan Electronic Recording Commission, and was elected by her colleagues to serve as third vice president of the Michigan Association of County Clerks. Lisa is a graduate from MSU and the Detroit College of Law. She's a member of the state bar and a former state representative. And I also want to just give another plug for Lisa, is that she goes into the jail, into the Oakland County Jail, to register people who are awaiting trial. And I know that that issue is of great interest to many of the co-sponsoring organizations here. Lisa, can you briefly describe your role and responsibility in regarding election management and integrity?
I will do my best. So first of all, Michigan is, our elections are run differently than 46 other states. We are decentralized, so our city and township clerks play very important roles in our elections. Precincts are under their purview, hiring those workers, all that sort of thing. So some of the things you heard about, you might have been like, well, why is she collaborating with the local clerks? Well, because the local clerks have those responsibilities. So we're different. So I'll start. I mean, to me, the first thing in election is candidates, right? So filing for office. So depending upon what they're filing for and where that is. So how do I make the, so state representatives, people who are running for state representative, if that seat is wholly contained within Oakland County, they file with me. If it crosses a county line, they file with the state. Local offices, we're very technical with who files where. It makes it confusing sometimes for people, but accepting those filings. And then the integrity part of that is we're checking signatures. Like if they collected, they circulated petitions to get signatures to get on the ballot, we're checking every single one of those to make sure that they match what the signature is in the qualified voter file. If they owe us reports or money, so you cannot run for office if you have outstanding campaign finance reports, or you can't be printed on the ballot, I guess I should say. So we're checking all that and making sure that everybody's on the up and up and deserves to have their name printed on the ballot. Ballot layout, programming, we do all of that. It's in a secure location in my office, so much so it's behind a door that has a code for the lock, and I do not know the code. And I don't need to know the code because I'm never going to be in that room. There's no reason for me, because I'm elected, there's no reason for me to ever be in that room without my staff. There's nothing that I would be doing. So I don't even know the code to that room. When we transport voted ballots, so you heard again, absentee ballots are normally tabulated at the local level. The law changed in 2020 that allowed local clerks to partner with their county clerk if their county clerk offered to have the tabulation of their absentee ballots done. So we do that for a number of our communities. We have law enforcement escort the transport of those voted ballots to ensure nothing happens along the way of them moving from where the ballots were tabulated to us. What else? Oh, the qualified voter file, which is the database of all voters. I have to go in every month and affirm that all the people who work for me in elections can still work there, so that no one has unauthorized access to the qualified voter file. So I have to go in and check every month. Yes, they should all still have access. Obviously we remove somebody if they're not, but, and then we oversee the Board of Canvassers, which is the body that certifies our elections afterwards. And they are made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And yeah, I think I'll stop because I know you have other questions to ask. Yeah. So,
I want to talk about the election integrity and the fact that, like, in the last presidential election, obviously there were a lot of people who were questioning the validity of the election results. So what I want to know is, in Oakland County and in Michigan, what are some of the critical measures that are implemented to ensure the security of the ballots from the moment they're cast until the final count? How do we know we can trust the results?
so as I said, for the absentee ballots that we tabulate, because sometimes it's not in my office, right? We're doing it somewhere else. We need a bigger space. So we have law enforcement escort the driver of those ballots to make sure that there's no pit stops or anything else, or anybody stops the car, right? Or the van. So we do that. Ballots, once they're tabulated, are then put in an approved ballot container, and it is approved by our Board of Canvassers. Like I said, it's made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and we have to do this I forgot if it's every 4 years or every 6 years, but we have to go through every single container that anything related to elections and transporting, whether it's a small not Ziploc bag, but a small zipper bag for thumb drives, or the ballot containers themselves. We go through, we make sure those zippers work correctly, that there's no rips, there's no tears, anything like that. So the ballots are put in the approved containers and then sealed with a numbered seal. That number on that seal is recorded in the poll book. The ballot container goes to the local clerk. The poll book comes to us at the county. So sort of being decentralized is like another layer of security and integrity in our elections, that those things aren't in the same location, so that if we have to open that ballot box either during a canvass to retabulate, or if there's a recount, we have to make sure that the number on that seal is what has been recorded in the poll book. So they've been kept separate. So no wrongdoings can be, somebody can't go in and open it and, change the ballots or whatever, and then seal it back up. Then there'd be a problem because the seal number wouldn't match. So that happens with all of our ballots. I think I have other things written down, but I can't even read my writing. So let's see. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it. I would say, yeah, okay, sorry. Go ahead. What's the next one? I'm trying to be mindful of time too.
No, that's okay. You're doing fine. If there's there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. So how do you address public concerns and skepticism and, frankly, just misinformation about the election process?
Well, I will say, since we've been doing absentee ballot counting, we are required to do public accuracy tests. So that's something that our local clerks have always done, but now this was something new for us. And you have to put a notice in the paper, but that's the thing that people like skim over, right? Nobody's ever reading those boxes in their local paper that say, hey, this is happening. So I put out a press release. I really blasted out so that people, and for the first couple years, really, I was having members of the media come. So the first 2 years, I think every time at least one of our local news channels was coming with a camera, which was great, so that they could see, like, they're filming, here we are testing our equipment, and we do it before every single election. And I think that's really important to hit home for how we do things. Every state does different things, but we test every piece of equipment before every single election. So having that other opportunity for voters to come and observe a public accuracy test, and we don't just run the test, we give them elections 101 on everything that we're testing, what's in the test deck. In Michigan, I think we have more rules than almost every state in our test deck. So we're testing to see if it recognizes that a ballot is undervoted, if it's overvoted, marginal lines in other areas to make sure it's not picking it up as a vote if it's like, you know, somewhere else on the ballot. We're making sure that, so we assign, let's say, candidate A 3 votes, candidate B 2 votes, and candidate C 1 vote. And we have ballots that have already been filled out that we feed into the tabulator to make sure that the tabulator is reading the ballots correctly and tabulating those results correctly. So the public accuracy test has been a great way. I will say that usually the people who come are people who are skeptical. And that's my favorite person to come, because every time they have left saying, well, now I wish it was a better statement, but I have to take what I can get. And that is, well, now I trust the elections in Oakland County. And to me, that's the first step. If I can get them, you know, they'll still say, but I don't trust them over there. Okay, start here, right? Start with what we're doing, where you live, and they trust. Of course, in Michigan, we had, there was a lot of attention to Dominion voting equipment. And there's nothing wrong with Dominion voting equipment, but people latched onto that and tried to make it that was an issue. And so a lot of the emails and letters I get is, and phone call, like, you and your Dominion voting equipment. And I say, we don't have Dominion voting equipment in Oakland County, so don't worry about it. Like, if that's their issue, like, it's easy for me to say, we don't, that's not the vendor that I chose for us. So you don't have to worry about that. Again, there's nothing wrong. And I always say, not that there's anything wrong with Dominion, just not what I picked, not what we have. Our equipment, I tell them, you know, nothing is connected to the internet. There's an air gap for our election night results. So just explaining things to people who are willing to listen, right? And that's the difference between maybe some of the people out there, is those who are willing to learn. Also encouraging people to work an election, right? If you don't trust it, if you come and work an election, you will see all the checks and balances that we have in place. And some of the people who have come to be challengers at our absentee voting counting board say, oh, this is really boring. It looks more fun to vote. I mean, to work, I think I'll come work it next time. And they do. They end up working for us because they see there's nothing to challenge. We do everything, you know, very accurately, very securely. We have Democrats and Republicans working together to adjudicate a ballot that maybe is flagged as being an overvote. So we have a Democrat, Republican looking at those ballots together and saying, okay, is that truly an overvote, or is that just a pen rest? And so those are some of the things that we do, that I do to help people understand all the checks and balances we have in place, and to assure them that our elections are in fact secure and accurate and fair.
And that's a great plug for that. Probably everybody needs more poll workers. So if you're interested in being a poll worker, please contact your local clerk. I'm sure this is perfect. Yeah, finish up.
I just want to add one thing, because you said that I go to the jail, and every state has different different laws on that. And I just wanted to clarify. So in Michigan, even if somebody's in jail, as long as they haven't been sentenced yet, they still have the right to vote. So I know other states are different with that. And also in Michigan, as long as you're out of jail, even if you're on probation, you once again have that right to vote. So yeah, I go over there to make sure that they either are registered or have access to getting the absentee ballot.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I'm gonna move on to Gabriella. Gabriella Cázares-Kelly is the Pima County recorder taking office in January of 21. She leads an office that oversees voter registration, early voting, and document recording for the county. She is a proud union dues paying former Red for Ed public school educator and community organizer. She is one of 4 women who founded Indivisible Fauna, a grassroots community organization that provides opportunities for education and civic engagement for members of her tribe, the Fauna Otham Nation. and I really hope I pronounce that correctly. Oh, good. She was inspired to run for office after encountering many systemic barriers preventing people from simply getting registered to vote. She is the first Native American to hold an elected Pima County office and only one of 4 Native Americans to ever hold a county level office in Arizona. Wow. That's amazing. Gabriella, I'm going to ask you the same 3 questions. Can you describe your role and responsibilities regarding election management and integrity?
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. First of all, Lisa, I'm so sorry you have to do all parts of the role. Here in Arizona, we have a bifurcated system so that candidates are managed by the elections department. Ballot design is managed by them. Tabulation is managed by them. My office is only concerned with voter registration and early voting. So we also have a really robust no excuse absentee ballot system here in Arizona, which legislators are trying to dismantle as we speak. However, we have 27 days of early voting, and we have something called the active early voting list, which enables people to sign up for a ballot, and they receive it for every election that they're eligible to participate in automatically. We oversee early voting sites. So the 27 days before election day, we are open. We have emergency voting where we will issue ballots. However, they are placed inside a ballot affidavit envelope. And my office is responsible, number 1, for the voter roll, and then number 2, matching up that signature with the ballot affidavit once we receive it. We rarely touch even voted ballot affidavits. I'm sorry, ballots. That is not our office. Our office is simply concerned with the outside of the envelope. And I saw a question about signature verification and the training that our staff have to go through. We have a statewide mandatory training. We have a forensic signature verification training. We have an internal practical hands-on type of signature verification. But when people they think about signature verification, many people, you can recognize a signature if you think about your partner's signature or your Aunt Kathy, or whoever you get those birthday cards from every year. Everybody automatically is learning how to signature verify every single day of the year. It's something that even my staff, I once put in a baby shower gift, and then I had a separate, it was a hat. It was something I had gotten for free that I gave to somebody, and I just wrote their name with no signature because it was free, and I just wanted to make sure that they had it. And they said, "Oh, this gift is from Gabriella." And I said, "I only gave you one." And then they hold it up, and there's my signature, or there's my handwriting. They can recognize my handwriting. And so what my office is responsible for, military and overseas voting, that's actually 45 days before election. We in Arizona have mailed a ballot to space. We've sent them to submarines. We've sent them on the back of a camel into the middle of the desert in the Sahara. We do whatever it takes to get people those ballots. And then similarly, we have team voting, which is something that it's very reserved. We really have to be careful about whether or not we can deploy. But long story short, if somebody is unable to leave whatever location they're at, so if that be a jail, hospital, or maybe their home, and maybe there was some reason why they missed the deadline to request a ballot and they're not going to be able to vote on election day, we can send a team to that location. It has to be carefully vetted because we have very low resources. But we have around 650,000 registered voters in Pima County. And I have a full-time staff of around 50 and a ballooned up staff of around 120. Election day is overseen by the elections department, which is wonderful. We don't have to do that. But we do have the early voting sites for that long period of time. And then we work really closely with the elections department to transfer over those ballot affidavits. And so I know the second question had to do with how are we ensuring that that the integrity of the system. Well, number one, that's starting with the voter list. We spend so much time doing daily maintenance on our voting, on our voter rolls. We are checking for deceased voters. We're literally looking at obituaries in the newspapers. We're receiving reports from the Secretary of State's office. We participate in the ERIC system, which is the election. Oh gosh, I'm gonna forget the acronym online. The Election Registration Information Center, I believe. So we're checking to see with other counties who has moved, if a voter moves out of Pima County and they move up to Maricopa County, whose voter is it? We're checking dates on all of that information. And then we're also mailing things. I think people really forget how important it is. People can't just insert a bunch of names. They have to have a lot of information about a voter to even be able to create a record. And then we send mail to that record. We send mail to that household. And if we receive it back, through the US Post Office, if it comes back, there's a process that inactivates that voter. And, we can't just create a list and stuff ballots. Like that's not something that's possible within our system. So, we're having to explain that a lot to constituents.
Thank you. One last question is, how do you address and manage public concerns and skepticism about the election process?
Yeah, we've done a lot of that here in Pima County. So first of all, I think it's important to know my position is an administrative position. This was a sleepy, quiet office. Most people did not, pay too much attention to what was happening in this office. And it was really been a drastic difference, I know, since 2020 and that election, which put a hot, heavy spotlight on our offices. And now it's very common to get media requests. I think I get a media request like every single day, probably. Either radio, print, sometimes blogs, TV. I've got national TV. Like it's just people have so many questions, and we have done a lot to try to get people to understand where these concerns are coming from. A lot of them are, of course, they're unfounded, but trying to get them to understand what the process is and the care that we take with each ballot affidavit. We keep and treat these documents as if they're sacred, because it's somebody's fundamental right that they're participating. And so we even talk about that within our office, and we talk about like how important each and every vote is. We go through a tremendous amount of training. We have people who have been with us for so many cycles, who are continuously trained. And we have put up so much on our website, even just informational things like, what's the day in the life of the ballot? What does the signature verification process look like? We've created informational tutorials. We've worked with the county to try to promote that. We've shared, on social media. We've really built up a robust social media platform. And then I say yes to every single group that asks me, which is why I'm here with you all. I wanted to mention is, if there is a request for people who want to nerd out and talk about voting, I want to be in that space, and I will answer every question as much as I can. And when people find, oh, there's actually a protocol for that. Oh, there's a process. And how many people are, people come in hot. They come in very angry and upset. And like a lot of people fail to recognize that voting is a very emotional process.
Yeah.
There have been very many of us who have been denied the right to vote. Our families or communities have been denied the right to vote, to participate. Just this past Sunday was 100 years of the Indian Citizenship Act, which for Native Americans, that meant we've only been citizens of the United States for 100 years.
Wow.
That absolutely includes my community. And so when people come and they encounter a problem, that's really terrifying. That's really terrifying for them. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, here it is, this systemic, white supremacy that's going to keep me away from participating, or this fraud, or this, whatever conspiracy theories. And so we have to train our team to be able to talk about the security practices that we have already in place, the backup plans that we have in place already. And I also think it's really important to be talking to people who don't understand the system, and who are angry, and who have all of these questions to a point. But I also think it's much more important to be talking to people who have never had access to this, people who have no idea what the process looks like. And we try to put that information out there, because a lot of people aren't really caring about the super wonky. I mean, you might have like a handful of people who are like demanding to know, where was this USB made, and what manufacturer, and what is how do you ensure that this is safe? But for every other person, they just want to know, where do I go?
Right.
How do I
Thank
participate?
you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your experience. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna, unfortunately, have to move us along. I want to introduce Election Supervisor Joe Scott. He is the elected leader responsible for conducting all federal, state, county, and municipal elections in Broward County, Florida. His professional career began as an Army officer after graduating from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. After serving in South Korea, he was promoted to captain and went on to serve as an embedded advisor with the Iraqi Army. While serving in Iraq, he earned a Combat Action Badge and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal. After his military service, and thank you for your service, Supervisor Scott earned an MBA from Villanova and spent more than a decade in the private sector. Since he assumed his current role in 21, Supervisor Scott has worked diligently to improve the capacity of the Supervisor of Elections office. He is focused on expanding in-person early voting, as well as ensuring that everyone who chooses to can vote by mail. He has dramatically improved the communications infrastructure of the SOE office and was recognized for innovation with the Democracy Award for Best Practice of 23 by the National Association of Election Officials. Thank you so much for being here with us, Supervisor Scott. And can you start by briefly describing your role regarding election management and integrity?
Thank you very much for having me. So in Florida, this has been a really interesting conversation, because we've gotten to hear from, a couple of other, probably even more important states than Florida in this upcoming election, in terms of Arizona and Michigan. That'll be, you guys are going to have a much bigger spotlight on you than I'll have this year. What we do in Florida is we actually do combine, like the way that Arizona has it split up, we actually combine all of those functions within one office. So it is at the county level. So our county level election officials are the elected officials. Our state level, our Secretary of State, who oversees for the entire state, is actually appointed by the governor. So it's sort of an important distinction that we're more of a bottom-up state, where it's decentralized, and the counties are able to much of what we do is done independently and run by independently elected officials at the county level. So in Broward County, we have 1.1 million registered voters. And my job is really in charge of maintaining the voter rolls. So that has everything to do with making sure that people are able to get registered to vote. We go out and do things like we conduct our high school voter registration drive every year. We make sure we are at those naturalization ceremonies that happen. We probably get as many people from the naturalization ceremonies as we get from high school voter registration, because Broward County is a very diverse and heavy immigrant rich community. And we are, we do lots of different things in the community to try to make sure that we're giving people every opportunity to register to vote, but also to do what's become a big thing in the state of Florida now is getting people to request their vote by mail ballots, because our state government and all their infinite wisdom has decided to make that something that has to happen repeatedly every election cycle. So that has become a major role now recently, for us to get in front of these people who've requested vote by mail ballots in the past, get them to fill out another form for us, and also to make sure that everybody else in the county is aware of the 3 different ways that you can vote, which is voting by mail. We have in-person early voting and in-person on election day. And, and really it's that communication to the whole public of what needs to be done in order for them to be able to actively participate and be part of the system and take advantage of all the different options that they have. That's a huge part of what we do day to day. But then, of course, there's that part of conducting the actual elections that comes down to getting those early voting sites set up. We're still finalizing a couple of locations, but we're looking at about 28 or 29 different early voting sites that we'll have set up for this election. And it'll be a 14-day early voting period that we'll have in November. And then, basically doing that, as well as having all those vote by mail drop boxes, which has become a hot issue since the last election. The drop boxes are going to look a lot different than they did in 2020. We actually now in the state of Florida, we call them secure ballot intake stations. And we are actually going to have tents set up around these boxes. You'll probably see 2 or 3 people sitting under the tent, around that box. And you'll see a big difference from what we had before and probably what you'll see in other states. So running all of those operations around election time of getting the ballots out to people, having the infrastructure in place for us to do in-person early voting, for us to collect ballots at these secure intake stations, and then of course just tabulating the votes, counting the votes, reporting the results, and doing all of the audits and certification that has to happen after the election. It's a big job, and it's exciting. It's definitely an exciting job, especially in a year like this.
And so what are some of the critical measures that you've implemented so that we know that the ballots are secure from the time they're cast until the time they're counted?
And I'll say, one thing is that Florida was seen as, even in 2020, we were praised as having the gold standard for how, we conducted elections. A lot of the problems that were being brought up, we really did not catch the same kind of heat that places like Arizona and Michigan. I was this newly elected elections official in 2020, just glued to the TV watching these officials in other states, including like Georgia and stuff, watching it like, oh my gosh, this could be me in 4 years. And we didn't catch that kind of heat. And it's funny is that, since then our legislature has just, gone back to the, drawing board 3 times. We've had 3 big bills get passed. We've had some big changes that have happened. As far as what people are going to see, the most visible thing will be what I already talked about with the drop boxes. The other thing that was pretty major was the fact that to get a vote by mail ballot, you do have to request every election cycle. And even beyond that, the fact that you have to provide us with an identifier when you request your vote by mail ballot. So this identifier thing has become a big issue. It's either your driver's license or your driver's license number or state ID number, or the last 4 digits of your social security number. And here's the catch. It's whichever one we have on file. So whatever you gave us when you registered to vote in the first place is the same number you have to give us when you request a vote by mail ballot. and that's the part that makes it fun. So so there have been some things that we've changed, some good, some bad. Gabriella brought up the ERIC system. One of the interesting chapters in elections history here in the state of Florida is that at one point there was some kind of wacky conspiracy theory floating around, and we have a state government that's very responsive to that kind of thing. And my state promptly pulled out of ERIC, which was a critical part of our infrastructure for making sure that our voter rolls were up to date, that it lets us know if a person registers to vote or in another ERIC participating state, we would get a notification and we would be able to pull those people off of our voter rolls since they were registered in another state, and we just don't have access to that anymore. So it's just it's been an interesting few years. I'm I've planning on sticking around. I've enjoyed it. And I'm sticking around for another term here. Got a couple more weeks until qualifying. So far I don't have any real opposition. But yeah, it's been an adventure, but we've done a lot of great things to make I think at the end of the day, people are going to find that the elections are far more secure this time than they were last time. I think election officials like myself are going to be so prepared for anything because we've had so many of these meetings now that my colleagues on the panel have talked about, where these people come in hot, ready to just like poke you in the chest and say you're doing everything wrong, and then we show them what we're doing, and they say, "Oh, okay, this is a lot more organized than I thought it was." Like, yeah, don't believe everything you hear on the internet. So it's been a road, and but I think this election cycle we're ready for it.
So Supervisor Scott, I'm gonna ask a question that was posted in the Q&A, since you already started to touch on it, which is about the ERIC system. So since Florida pulled out, how do you determine whether somebody voted in another state?
Our all-wise leadership in Tallahassee has been working hard to come up with other solutions in place of ERIC. We do have one of the new systems that we've actually just recently implemented is that we are looking for people who have gotten a driver's license in another state. So that's one of the things we've done that I think is probably one of the biggest sort of ERIC replacements, is that we're now basically we now have a process in place as part of our overall maintenance of the voter rolls to sort of address these individuals. I mean, it's certainly not perfect, because the fact that you got a driver's license in another state, especially if you're a military person, does not necessarily mean that you're not still one of our voters and that you don't intend to vote in Broward County. So it is it's not a perfect replacement for ERIC, but it is something that we're doing in place of what was done before.
So it sounds like you wish you were back in the ERIC system.
Oh, I mean, ERIC worked. I mean, honestly, I think it's one of those things that a lot of us were skeptical about when it first started. But then once we sort of saw how it was working, we realized that it was a positive thing. I mean, one thing is that we all want to have, we all want to have clean voter rolls. We don't want to be the one every time, you get these cases. And by the way, in my opinion, it's totally on these individuals who maybe own a house in 2 different states and want to go and vote in both places. And I think generally people are aware that that's illegal. And if they choose to do that and they manage to slip through the cracks and pull that off, I don't want it to happen in my county. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to deal with the press and all these, angry people. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my voter rolls are good. And that's the way everybody is, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. We don't want to deal with the nonsense. So we want our, and ERIC was a tool that helped us do that.
Thank you. I'm going to move into some other questions. And since you're talking, the perfect opportunity to move into a question about purges. So I know some states have performed a lot of purges of the voting rolls. Some people think those are great. Some people think that those were not legitimate voting purges. How does purging the voter rolls happen in your state? How do you make sure that the purges, you're only purging voters who actually should be purged. So if you can each take just a moment to briefly answer that. Why don't we go ahead and start with you, Joe.
So yeah, that's one of the things that's changed with the 3 changes to our laws here in the state of Florida, is that we've made it actually much harder for people to register, because we've made it virtually impossible for community groups to do voter registration drives. And at the same time, we've made it incredibly efficient in terms of removing people from the voter rolls. It's usually tied to the fact that somebody moves and doesn't update their address. So it's extremely important, if you move inside the state of Florida, if your address changes, that even if you just go get a new driver's license or update your state ID with your new address, then our records will get updated. But inevitably, if you don't do that, then you're going to end up part of this process to potentially get removed from the rolls. The other big part of that is people who don't participate, who don't vote. But I would say the biggest problem in terms of how we conduct list maintenance is the fact that people who are highly mobile, people who rent and maybe change, and especially here, rents have been out of control. People are moving a lot, and people who don't update their address, if we get a return piece of mail, there's a good chance you're going to end up getting removed from the voter roll. So it's very, very important to keep that information up to date with us.
Thank you. Oh, while you're, Gabriella and Lisa, while you're answering this question, if you can also say a moment about like, how do you make sure that people who are dead aren't voting? I know you touched on it, Gabriella, but if you want to go ahead, Gabriella, and answer the question about purges.
Sure. We're very careful about the use of the word purge. I think purge is very scary for people. We do have voter cancellations, and as Joe said, what happens is once we've received a piece of undeliverable mail, and we don't know what the voter's situation is. That could be something like their mailbox was too full, or they had an away, they had a non-forwardable piece of mail come to them, and by federal law, we can't forward ballots. So, there's a lot of reasons why a piece of mail might get popped back to us. And so what we do is we send a notification to them via first class mail, and that way it can be forwarded to that person, and we let them know, hey, we tried to send you some mail, and something happened. If we receive that mail, that second piece of mail back, that person goes into an inactivation status, and that inactivation can be canceled at any time once the voter has contacted us. So that could be if they call us and they say, hey, I didn't get my ballot, I don't know why. And we said, oh, well, we tried to mail you on this date, and is your address still good? And they say, yeah, I just don't check it very often. We can reactivate that person verbally after confirming that person's identity. If that person comes in to vote, either through early voting or if they come on election day, they will automatically be reactivated, because they have to present identification and they have to present current information. And if not, then they have to fill out a voter registration form. And so, or, they may be required to do a provisional ballot. And so either way, if we do not hear from that person in 2 federal election cycles, which is 4 years, we then cancel those voters. So that is who we purge. And again, we have tried to notify them. We have sent notices. We have done everything we can. And that person can absolutely register again if they'd like to. For dead voters is kind of tricky. My county has 630,000 registered voters. We have around 540,000 voters who vote by mail. And we print all of those ballots, and we have them ready to go to be mailed in pallets that are in huge semi trucks. I think we have 2 semi trucks that transport them to the post office. And depending on when that person dies, if that person dies the day before the ballots go out, there's absolutely no way that we're going to be able to find that needle in a haystack before they're sent out. The other thing is having to do with notifications. If people are if they pass away in Arizona, we're going to get the Arizona records that show this person has passed away in Arizona. However, if that person was on vacation, they were in Jamaica, or they were somewhere else where Arizona is not issued a death certificate, then it may become up to the family. And that's why we look at obituaries. It has to be a paid obituary. We also take a look, because our office also does land transactions. We take a look at any of those death certificates that have been issued via land transactions, and we cross-reference them with the other side of our house on the voter side. We do a lot, but we are always talking about that it is the responsibility of the voter and anyone who receives mail to them that they should not be receiving at their mail, to contact our office and help us maintain the health of the voter records.
Thank you. Lisa, can you comment on purging and?
Yeah, I agree. Purging, not a good word. Especially because it makes it sound like it's a lot of voters all at once, right? And there's really not going to be a situation where that's the case. So for us, local clerks maintain the voter rolls more so than we do. There was a new legislation in Michigan recently because county clerks are also over vital records. So the death records are filed in my office. Different staff, but still my office. So the communication between that now with the new legislation, that county clerks can now designate someone as deceased or flag them. So then the local clerk, it comes into their inbox and our qualified voter file and our database, so that they know to remove that person as deceased. You know, it's a tricky thing to talk about dead people voting, right? Because we also have early voting in Michigan. That's new. And if somebody goes and early votes and then unfortunately like pass away 2 days later, right? I mean, their ballot's counting because they were alive when they cast their ballot. And so it gets into this like weird kind of semantics thing. But I think it's I don't know. I don't want to say urban myth, but it's one of those like conspiracy theories, like that dead people are voting. They're not. There may be names on the voting rolls because people haven't caught that yet. And like was said, maybe they, passed away out of state. That's one of the beauties of Eric is sharing all that information between states. That's the beauty of it. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that someone has already passed away and then is voting. Like
right.
They like to say that, but nobody has been able to point to anything.
And Lisa, I know that Gabriella said that in Arizona that ballots can't be forwarded in the mail. Can they?
That's true. That's true. Ballots cannot be forwarded. And we have a similar process of a countdown of if somebody hasn't voted in 2 statewide elections, they get notification. If they don't respond to that, then they're put on the cancellation countdown. And then if in 2 more elections they haven't done anything, then they're removed. So there's that same kind of process as well. And I want to say one other thing though. I did have one of our local clerks in my county. So this has been for a couple of years now, where we have a group of activists who have taken it upon themselves to try and clean up the voting rolls. And yeah, I'm using air quotes a lot because they have sent county clerks spreadsheets of names of people. And when I got it, I'm like, this isn't my job, so I'm not looking at it. One of my colleagues looked and she said one of the people was on her a name that was sent to her. One was her neighbor who just got a P.O. box. Like he didn't move, but he just got a P.O. box. So they were saying that person should be removed. And then another person was a snowbird. So like there is a process for somebody to say, hey, I think that this person should be removed, like that they can challenge, but they have to sign an affidavit. They have to have a good faith belief that that person has moved from there. You know, hey, I saw the moving trucks and somebody else has moved in, and you know, that kind of a thing. But one of my local clerks, and it did unfortunately make national news, removed over 1,000 voters because one guy signed one affidavit saying over 1,000 people, I checked them all out and they should all be removed, and she removed them. They have all now been reinstated, but it wasn't a pretty situation.
So I know that Gabriella and Joe both put up their hands up. They wanted to say something, and I still do also have like a ton more questions. So briefly, Gabriella.
Yeah, if dead people are voting, most often it's a family member who knows what mom's signature looks like and tries to forge it. And the way that we catch it is with the dates of when we've received it, because that document is scanned and we have a barcode that says, yeah, we received this on the 9th and mom died on the, you know, on the whatever, on the 18th or, you know, something like that.
Right. Joe.
Yeah, that was a great point Gabriella just made, is that's the way. I mean, they do eventually get caught if it does in fact happen. But the point I wanted to make was the fact that there's oftentimes these people who are out there talking about this, they're conflating two different things. They're talking about how many dead people there are in the voter rolls, which just means that they're registered. That doesn't mean that they voted. And it's like, if you want that number to be 0, I'd have to have a heart monitor on everybody who's registered to vote. So the second they die, they get removed. I mean, there's a process. It takes time. I'm not going to know who passed away immediately. So yes, there will be dead people on the rolls. When we have a problem is if the dead person actually shows up and votes. That's when we have a problem. And that is extremely rare. And those cases do get prosecuted.
Yeah. Thank you. I have this is a really important question. Have you had any threats or have had any problems getting recruits because of of threats against election workers? And do you have any good tools for catching people that are dangerous or making serious, credible threats? Whoever wants to take a stab at that.
I'll start, I guess. Have we received threats? Yes. My elections director just was the recipient of a death threat during a recount. We're now in the process of the prelim examination for the criminal charges against that person. That was in person. In Oakland County, somebody in our IT department monitors social media on election day to see if there's any threats that come up on any kind of social media or anything that doesn't sound right. One of our local clerks received a death threat that made national news that he recently, I think, pled guilty. She's not a clerk anymore. I think that was part of the reason. It was really not a very nice phone call that was on her machine, but I will say that generally we don't have a problem with people who are willing to work and wanting to work and be part of the democratic process. Even though, you know, I mean, and I will say Michigan recently passed a new law that makes it a new crime. It's a new crime to intimidate or harass an election worker when they're trying to do their election duty. So it applies to me, my staff, but also people who work in the precinct on election day or who work our early voting site. So it applies to anyone working election. This is now a specific crime, a new charge for people who intimidate or harass election workers in Michigan. So it's a kind of an extra protection that we feel like we have now.
Okay. In Arizona, home of Maricopa County, that is super, everybody knows about Maricopa County and the cyber ninjas audits and all of that happening here. And because, I don't know because of that or what, because I wasn't elected then, but we have a whole organization called the Arizona Center for Counterterrorism. The Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, which is called ACTIC. And they that is Homeland Security, it's the FBI, it's the CIA, it's local police, it's elections officials, Secretary of State. We're all in connection with one another, as well as the federal. We have a lot of federal, CISA, the Cybersecurity Administration. We have a lot of people who are kind of watching out for us and monitoring social media, monitoring websites, trying to infiltrate chat groups and different things like that. And we are getting monthly trainings about security, physical security, cybersecurity, like how to de-escalate, things about swatting. In 2022, an extremist candidate tweeted that we weren't moving fast enough, and our office got a barrage of phone calls, and there were 3 that were like yucky enough. They weren't threats of violence, but they were disgusting and racist and fat phobic and anti-women type of comments directed at me that had to be then forwarded to the ACTIC. I will contrast that in with the 300 or so that Maricopa County received. However, I also live in the same district that Gabby Giffords, who was shot 12 years ago. It only takes one. And so I don't ever want to minimize it, but there have been 15 county recorders. There are 15 total in the state, and we have had 7 resign or retire. And we've seen a mass exodus of election workers. Promoting or recruiting new people hasn't been as difficult, but also they're underpaid. I saw the comment in there about poll workers being underpaid, and yeah, that's absolutely a problem, and we have to address it.
Well, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's terrible. Joe, do you want to add anything to this question?
Sure. I would say, on the recruiting side, it hasn't been a problem. We've seen a lot of turnover in the state of Florida for elections officials, just like across the country. So a lot of turnovers happened. We actually did have a threat against one of our early voting sites. The individual involved in that did end up pleading guilty. So, our FBI, the Miami field office, definitely have to give them credit. They've been on top of these things. I've gotten death threats myself, and they've jumped on top of those and gone after those people. It's and it's important, and it also gets covered in the news locally. So, so I think that helps us in terms of when they know that, it becomes a federal, that these people end up getting charged federally for, for threats against election officials. And I think that helps in terms of making sure that the public knows that they'll be protected, that you've got, the biggest, baddest cops here are gonna go after anybody who wants to pick on you. And so I think that's been extremely helpful. And it's been and I definitely I haven't seen any problems with recruiting, just turnover, but not so much on the recruiting side.
So I know we're running over, and I just have to give apologies to everybody whose questions didn't get answered. I'm sitting here really wishing we'd scheduled this to be an hour and a half or even 2 hours, because there are so many great questions. So I apologize that we're running over. I would love for each of you to just give one sentence about in what would you like everyone here, all the participants, to take away from this webinar, knowing about election integrity and trust at the local level. If you can just give 1 or 2 sentences, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Joe.
I think that there wasn't a problem in 2020, but since then things have only gotten even more secure. So, if 2020 was the most secure election that we ever had, I fully expect 2024 to exceed that and to have even better measures in place. And I think the American public can can rest assured that that our elections are secure, and not to listen to political voices, listen to the experts.
Thank you. Gabriella?
Elections are administered by your friends and family and neighbors. And we're real people, and we are following protocols and the law. and we're doing our very best, and we want to help make voting as easy as and accessible as possible so that as many people can participate in our most fundamental of rights as Americans.
Thank you. Lisa?
Ditto. I would say our elections are secure, they're accurate, they're fair. They are run by people who take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and adhere to that. And maybe we're elected in a partisan manner, but that's not how we do our jobs. We are committed to ensuring that those that are eligible voters have access to the ballot, that our results are secure, that our results are accurate. There are so many checks and balances that we all have in place to ensure all of those things. And I ask people to share that information with their networks. And if they don't, again, you talk to a doubter, suggest that they go work an election, right? Or at least be a challenger to observe, or they don't even have to be a challenger. They can just observe, right? Sit in the public area, come to a public accuracy test, all these different things where they have an opportunity to see it with their own eyes and see that our process works, our democratic process works. And yeah. And
Thank you
trust
so
us,
much.
as Gabriella
sure-
said, we're your neighbors, we're your friends, we're your, we go to the same synagogue, or we shop at the same grocery store, like, people who work in elections, and we should be trusted.
I want to say, I'm sure that I can speak for all of us here when I say, please make sure you're registered to vote. Please remember to vote, whatever your political persuasion is, whoever you're voting for, let your voice be heard. Be sure that you vote. And I want to thank Lisa and Joe and Gabriella. I want to thank you all so much, not just for tonight, but for the hard work that you do. It's a hard and thankless job to be a public servant, and we need more people exactly like the three of you. I want to thank you so much. I apologize for running over. I was going to talk about the upcoming webinars, but please go to our website, jfasd.org, or our Facebook page, and we will we have many great webinars. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all of the hard work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.